Welcome to Yap Time with Alexandros. I am your host, Alex, so let's chat. I want to talk to you folks about a news story that I saw from January 1st of this year that was kind of a flash in the pan story. It's been buried in the last week or two by a lot of other things going on in the news. But this particular story is something that probably everyone should be paying attention to. On January, not January, sorry, I'm recording this live. On March 1st, of this year, a guy named Martin O'Malley did an interview on CNBC. Now, if you're not familiar with Martin O'Malley, he was appointed by Joe Biden during the Biden administration to be the commissioner of the Social Security Administration, the head of Social Security, effectively, right? The agency that collects the payroll taxes and sends payments out to millions of Americans. And in this interview, Martin O'Malley had what might be, in its own way, one of the most ominous and concerning statements that I think I've ever heard from any public official about really anything at all. And his warning was that the actions of the current administration and the actors in it are actually really threatening an interruption of Social Security benefits. And O'Malley said, here's a direct quote, he said, ultimately, you're going to see the system collapse and an interruption of benefits. O'Malley said, I believe you will see that within the next 30 to 90 days. People should start saving now, he added. So, Social Security is the sort of kind of like grand entitlement program in the United States. It's the most recognized, the biggest, and the most widely known. And I thought I would spend a little time today, first giving you kind of like a tiny little bit of background, but then walking through kind of a potential scenario, right? What would actually happen if, God forbid, it came to pass that Social Security payments simply didn't go out for a month or for 2 months? So, with that, let's begin by kind of establishing kind of like some baseline stuff. So, Social Security is a hugely significant program in the United States. It serves as a financial lifeline for about 69 to 73 million Americans, depending on like how you count it, and which parts of Social Security they benefit from, because there's different parts. It provides essential support for retirees, for disabled individuals, as well as family members, surviving family members of people who've passed away. More than that, Social Security is the primary income source for many beneficiary. About 40% of men and 44% of women over the age of 65 get 50% or more of their income from Social Security. To give you another idea, about 40% of Americans rely solely on Social Security income for their retirement, right? Social Security checks that they receive from the payroll taxes they paid when they were working, that is what lets them survive. It's what lets them help pay for rent, mortgages, food, medicine, other essential services. Social Security is a massive, massive program in the U.S. Like I said, about 70 million people are get paid from Social Security every single month. And maybe another important thing to understand about Social Security and why O'Malley's warning was so dire. Social Security, the first Social Security check went out on January 31st of 1940 to a woman named Ida Mae Fuller, who was a school teacher and a legal secretary in Ludlow, Vermont. She got the very first one. Since that first check and the first rounds of check went out in 1940, Social Security has never failed, or never failed in kind of like any major way. It's true that from time to time, sometimes people will have like an individual, like there'll be a clerical error or an administrative error, or like, a bug, which might prevent a person from getting a check exactly on time, but, they rectify that pretty quickly. But what I'm saying is that Social Security collectively has never systemically, never on a large scale, ever failed to pay out. Social Security is a bedrock of American society. It is one of the kind of not one of like only the central sort of like entitlement programs that we have in this country that pays beneficiaries. It's an entire part of the U.S. economy. It enables a part of the U.S. economy, if you will, and a substantial part of it. Like I said, about 70 million Americans receive payments for it each month. And Social Security, sorry, I'm just reading from some notes here. I'm just recording this live, so bear with me. Another important thing to understand about Social Security is if you're an American who works and you've ever looked at a pay stub, you already see where the Social Security or how much you're paying out, right? On your pay stub, if you look at like, your taxes withholding or whatever, you should see a line called, usually it's referred to as FICA or the Federal Insurance Contributions Act. That is the payroll tax where Social Security comes from. To give you folks some idea, and for those of you who maybe aren't aware, in terms of how it works, the payroll tax works like this. Half of the payroll tax is paid by your employer, your company or whatever, and the other half is paid by you. You pay, as an employee, you pay 6.2% of your wages, and your employer matches that 6.2%, right? So the total is like 12.4% basically from your paycheck. If you're self-employed, you have to pay both shares. And to give you folks some idea, in 2023, there were about 183 million workers who paid out $1,233 billion in payroll taxes. It's a lot of money. And just as kind of like a final little factoid, I know I'm blasting you all with a lot of data and statistics, but this stuff is important. People live off of it. Today, the average Social Security payment is about, it's a little under $2,000 a month in the U.S. The very first one that went out to Ida Mae Fuller back in 1940 was for, would have been about $500 in today's money. And so, like I said, Social Security is like, I'm struggling to find words for how important it is, right? Without it, a substantial portion of the American population effectively has no income, about 70 million people, or has their income so radically reduced to a point where most of them would honestly struggle to survive, or many of them would struggle to survive, particularly older retirees, some of whom don't have the ability to just, go out and simply apply for a job the way a younger person might. There's a number of, Social Security has faced a number of challenges over the years, things like budget cuts, as well as they're proposing kind of like a reduction in force layoff, which is the fancy business term for layoffs, right? Closing regional offices, those are all things the current administration has broached. Social Security is a bedrock, like I said, is a dinosaur. It's been around for a while. And like a lot of dinosaurs, parts of it are honestly pretty creaky, but that doesn't mean it fails to work. The technology and infrastructure of Social Security is very old. A lot of it is built in what's called COBOL, which is a programming language that came out, oh my gosh, I think in like 1959. I work in tech. I've never used it myself. So some of the systems are certainly old, but it pays out for a huge chunk of Americans and provides them a living. It's not something to be taken lightly, certainly not something to be tampered with. And that's one reason why Martin O'Malley's warning was honestly so dire, I thought. So what I want to talk about now is a hypothetical scenario. It's a scary and doom-ridden scenario. And I know there's a lot of doom scrolling in the news these days. There's a lot of terrible and ominous things to focus on. But I'll put to you that the possibility of a major disruption of benefits in Social Security is such a big story, and such a story that touches so many people's lives instantly, that it dwarfs everything else that is happening right now in the U.S. economy. The fluctuation, the massive contraction we're seeing in the stock market, that's nothing compared to Social Security payments not going out. The tariffs and trade wars the Trump administration is engaging with around the world, that is nothing compared to what a Social Security benefit disruption would be. The recent budget standoff in Congress, which just got resolved today, they agreed to extend the budget. That is nothing compared to a disruption in Social Security benefits. A disruption in Social Security benefits is an event of a scale that no person in America has really ever lived through. Like I said, it's paid out consistently and never really failed to pay out for 80, 85 years now, right? There is virtually no living person in the United States who even remembers what life was like before Social Security or before it paid out. So let's talk a little bit. I want to talk about this kind of on two levels. I want to start at the individual level, or like what's called, sort of the micro level, right? What happens to individual households that depend on Social Security if it doesn't go out? So the first and most obvious thing that would happen if People wake up one day and, oh, the Social Security check just isn't there. It's not deposited. The money's not there. And it is announced that there is some massive disruption or whatever happens, whatever chicanery and nonsense. That immediately, instantly, throws 70 million Americans into a financial crisis instantly, right? This isn't like at the government level. This isn't at the level of international trade, right? This affects real people immediately, a huge percentage of the American population. So, what are those 70 million people going to struggle to do? Well, they're going to struggle to afford housing. They're going to struggle to afford food. They're going to struggle to afford medical care. Struggling to afford housing is going to lead to higher rates of evictions, delinquencies from property rentals, from mortgages, right? And that's just one tiny way that all that stuff bleeds out. You'll also find, that individuals aren't able to afford things, right? They're going to have to fill in the gap in that income somewhere, right? You'll start to see people take out a lot of short-term loans, which means, of course, that consumer debt, which is already at an all-time high, that skyrockets too. In addition to that, you'll see increasing exponential pressure placed on other government assistance programs, things like SNAP, et cetera, right? If people have to make up that massive hole they now have in their monthly income, they will look anywhere they can or to any other government program to do that. The TLDR of it, folks, is that and I'm glossing over a lot. I'm trying to focus on things that are, kind of cold and factual because the individual reality is so frightening and so gruesome, right? People aren't going to be able to afford food. They're not going to be able to afford housing. They're not going to be able to afford medicine and other basic necessities. The upheaval that this causes is absolutely systemic at every level. Now let's back up a little bit and go a little higher, and let's talk about kind of like at the macroeconomic level. Broadly speaking, again, we're talking about these kind of big statistical kind of aggregates and groupings. Well, what would it mean for kind of the whole kind of economic picture in America in general? The biggest thing you would see is that consumer spending would tank, right? Consumer spending, you and I are consumers. Consumer spending is all the stuff that you and I buy every day. Consumer spending in the United States drives about 70% of GDP, of gross domestic product, right? One of the major ways that we even think about, well, what even is the economy, right? All of the goods and services that you and I consume all the time. That immediately, GDP itself immediately takes a huge hit, right? Whatever contractions we're seeing in the stock market today, that is nothing, infinitesimal, compared to the hit that would come if consumer spending craters like that, which it will crater if Social Security payments fail to go out. That, in turn, will lead to a massive drop in investor confidence. Investors are already not confident right now in U.S. markets. You would see enormous volatility throughout pretty much all like exchanges and security markets in the U.S. And more than that, though, at a deeper level, it's easy to talk about all this cool, abstract, economic stuff and try to be dispassionate. What this is, a breakdown in Social Security payments reflects a failure on the part of government institutions to manage and perform what we think of as one of their essential duties, right? Social Security payments must go out. They've gone out consistently for 80 years. Whoever is in charge when the first payment fails, the blame would be astronomical and immediate across a huge swath of American society. You can spin trade wars, you can spin tariffs, you can massage the optics of X, Y, and Z. You can't massage the optics of 70 million Americans losing a substantial portion of their income, or at least you can't do it easily. The public outcry over this would dwarf anything that's probably been seen in living memory in the U.S. There's been some videos recently, of those town halls congressional members have been doing, and people have been yelling at them. Congressional members would be very lucky if that was the most angry people got during a town hall after Social Security payments had had failed to go out. They would the blame laid at the feet of the federal government would be astronomical. It would be very, very difficult to predict what would happen. I sincerely doubt it would remain peaceful for any substantial amount of time, and I'm being quite serious about that. It's 70 million people. The political repercussions of this would immediately completely take over any administration it happened under. It wouldn't matter who the president was at the time. It immediately becomes the biggest political and economic story in the year because it's the most broadly felt story, right? There's just nothing else that instantly affects that many people. I don't think, and it's easy to be alarmist and to try and build hype around things, but I really think that if Social Security, as the former Commissioner O'Malley said, if payments fail to go out in a major way in the next 90 days, that puts us in a political no man's land and an economic and social no man's land. That is a fundamental breakdown of the social contract in a way that instantly touches everyone. It's not symbolic, it's economic, it's real. That money isn't in your bank account. There's a lot of other impacts it would have as well, but I think also, folks, one of the other major impacts it would have, stepping back even further and looking at it from even kind of higher up in terms of like the global economy, you would probably start to see a lot of foreign capital strongly sell off their positions, that sell off the U.S.-based assets that they own, and you would see them pull out at a scale we've probably never seen before. One thing a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of the capital, the money in the United States, comes from abroad, right? We live in a global economy. Money comes and goes where it may, because that's what money does. It moves around in the world. If Social Security payments fail to go out, that is going to also trigger a panic internationally for creditors, for people who own nations that own our debt, or really own any asset that is backed by the full faith of the American government. Because Social Security payments failing means that the credit of the U.S. government ceases to be as creditworthy as it was. You probably see they probably reduce the U.S.'s credit rating, right? Those credit rating agencies. But more than that, more than like it going from AAA to AA or whatever, you would see a massive exodus of foreign capital and foreign investment from the United States. That, on top of all the other disruption, would create an economic whiplash that no administration on earth is prepared to deal with. The effect of that many Americans, that many consumers, suddenly not having income, or the income they're used to, would blow a 70 million person hole in the U.S. economy. It would be that big. It would be of such a magnitude that it would dwarf every other event probably that happened in the year. It would be the most ruthlessly symbolic event possible, right? Social Security checks not going out. It's hard to know what to think or how to respond to that, right? If that was to happen, the federal government would have to immediately work to try to stabilize the system to get the payments going, or those payments going out again, right? Given the current cuts being proposed by the administration and the various surrogates, I won't name them, who want to, make the government quote unquote more efficient, gutting the Social Security Administration, doing mass layoffs, not only makes just reducing the cost of what it takes to run Social Security, that not only makes a failure of Social Security more likely, it makes it that much harder to recover from a failure after it happened. If payments fail to go out 1 month, that is an unprecedented crisis. If they fail to go out for, God forbid, 2 months in a row, that would be that would be an even bigger kind of crisis, right? Once is an outlier, twice is a pattern, so to speak. Even if it happened once, though, to be honest, the economic shock wave of that would be too big for probably most of us to fathom. It would fundamentally alter the American economy in ways that are hard to imagine. It's like I said, folks. There's all sorts of economic chaos going on in the world right now because of what the U.S. administration or what the president and his administration are trying to do. But there's chaos and there's chaos, right? Tariffs and trade policy are damaging and hurtful, but at the end of the day, tariffs are the whim of one person with a pen. Congressional budget issues and the threat of government shutdowns and defaults, those are political issues, right? You simply get enough people in Congress to vote on them. They feel enough pressure, they'll vote on it, and voila, the debt ceiling is raised, a budget is agreed upon, right? Those sorts of problems have a very specific and very precise and very easy solution. 70 million Americans not having income, losing their Social Security payments, that doesn't have a fast or easy remediation. There's no stroke of a pen that can fix that. There's no congressional vote that can fix that. That is a deeper and more abiding problem. It is the U.S. falling off a cliff, if, God forbid, it does happen. Hopefully, it doesn't. But I just wanted to chat with you all today because that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. And I guess we'll see. I sincerely hope that, Martin O'Malley's prediction is wrong. I don't want him to be right. I'm sure he doesn't want to be right either. But we will see what happens. But certainly something to be on the lookout. Like I said, Social Security payments not going out, that will snowball faster than everything else the administration is doing put together. So that is something that, I suppose we should all probably be paying attention to in this age of relentless doom scrolling and being told that everything is the worst thing that happened. Some things actually are a true emergency if they do come to pass. So let's hope that that doesn't. At any rate, thank you all for listening today. This is Yap Time with Alexandros. Like I said, I'm your host, Alex. I appreciate you all listening. Thanks, folks.